Today we're going to be talking about marathons and half marathons from start to finish, including setup, reporting, segments, race joy, check-in, and some other troubleshooting and best practices. We are going to let everyone kind of settle in here, but as usual, when people are gathering, just be aware that if you do have a question, feel free to toss them the tool for GoToWebinar. We've got Matt Avery and Shelly Harris on the back end monitoring those questions. And if anything needs to get kind of brought up, we'll socialize that. We also will have time at the end for some Q&A. Another note, as people are coming in here, we will send you a recording of this webinar, but you should also be aware in a slightly more urgent way that we are going to have the Timer Summit again, returning to Tampa, Florida, from January 27th to 28th. We're going to make it a little bit longer this year on the second day, but last year we did sell out. So if you're thinking about it, signing up sooner rather than later is a good idea. All right, without further ado, let's get started because it is marathon season. So some of the stuff that we're going to cover today, we'll start in the race day scoring area, talking about splits, checks, and exports. We'll go through check-in best practices, race joy in particular, the timing integration, results and reporting, and some organizing and troubleshooting. One thing that I do want to highlight here is that this is going to be a fairly high-level discussion, which means that we are not going to dive into as much the nuts and bolts of how to do some of this stuff. But you'll notice in each segment, other than the organizing and troubleshooting, we have some resources included there for further reading, other webinars that will deal with the specifics of those pieces. Also, always be aware that you can reach out to info if it's a check-in or app setup, or race day at RunSignup.com via email if you have questions about some of these things. Pardon me. So let's start with race day scoring. So with marathons and half marathons, more than almost any other race, with the exception of maybe triathlons, we deal with a lot of segments and splits. Splits would be, timing hardware that you're putting out on the course, either to give yourself as the timer a better picture of what's going on out there, or to provide tracking, or just, race data to participants after they finish the race. These are a pretty important facet here because they can help you assess performance, determine if someone's changed races, and maybe if you need to DQ someone. Again, this is how that you can provide course notifications to spectators at home. They're a great spot to add sponsor activation value and drive integrations like race joy with predictive pace. A little bit more on that later. This also is a very useful part to play if you have an organizer who has a very high value product with social media, where they're trying to update people. Hey, the leaders are here. Here's who's in the lead. And maybe they want to know the name of some of those people there. Can help with traditional media. If you have a local television affiliate who is doing like an overlay, maybe you want to be providing updates with course progress to these people, and also just keep an eye on participant safety. Someone comes in the tent looking for so-and-so, being able to say, well, we last saw them at this location is very helpful there. It's also a good way to make more money. If you're selling splits, that's a big value add. That's a way for you to make some money on getting those splits out there, and also get your staff some field reps out there setting up. For some staff, it's kind of a nice reward to go to a race out of town, and it's kind of a highlight of the year for some people. Marathon season is a great way to get to see more of the country, get to be a part of the running community in different cities, and just kind of see everybody celebrate all the work that they've put in throughout the year training. So some split considerations as you're looking at setting up segments and splits. We're going to refer to them in splits in this course. Segments would be how you'd break that up in race day scoring, but splits are the physical on course counterpart that drives that. So knowing your locations for splits ahead of time is really important. Work with the organizers to find those locations. If you are helping determine them, determining a good split kind of comes down to, is it a usable distance? You know, does that mean something to spectators and participants? 4.34 miles doesn't really mean a lot. 5 kilometers is something that's pretty universally understood. Is it a good location for tracking? Does this help participants, you know, get tracked and confirm that they did the right course? And then is this something that you can get to? Like, can you actually set up timing hardware at this location? When you're doing this, this should be done far in advance, because this is going to determine your hardware commitments, your staff commitments, and a lot of other setup pieces. It's pretty common, especially if they're putting splits out, for races to be certified, to have a certified course. This would mean that there is a USATF certified map out there somewhere. Unfortunately, it might also mean that there's several USATF certified maps out there. So confirming with the organizer what the actual location, physical location of these splits goes a long ways. They might actually go out there and paint down marks on the road that makes your life so much easier. And if not, it might not be the worst idea for you to get out there with maybe some chalk paint, or at least your phone camera. And when you go out there to visit these splits or get this information from organizers, you will want to know how wide they are, because that determines a lot of hardware needs. You'll want to know where the staff can park their vehicle. Probably not on the course, so probably nearby, but where would that be? Probably also not on the grass. What time does the road close? When the first runner would be, and when does the road reopen? It's also good to establish whether or not you're waiting for a sag wagon or a trail vehicle, or if it's just kind of at your timer's discretion when they open that up. And then get your staff comfortable with where their split is going to be. If possible, you know, have them go look at that the day before. They're probably going to be setting up this time of year in the dark. So being able to find that location and know what the layout looks like is really important. And this can be the difference between someone setting up in the wrong spot or not, or even getting to the right spot with the road closures that some marathons entail. And then also making sure that those staff members know how to get you the data. Is this a spot that has a weak signal on one service provider but not on another? Do you have Starlink? If so, you know, is one side of the road better for tree coverage than the other? If part of the road is still open, which part is that? So getting out there, seeing this physically, and establishing that is going to make sure that you as the timer get the best data, which is going to provide the best experience for everybody. Data checks, if you're not familiar with them, I would really encourage you to take a look at these webinars down here. Data checks are really a good way to just look at the race in a very analytical way. We give you 6 of them by default: no age, no gender, no chip, and in these instances, most usefully, suspicious times, which would be people performing over 90% age graded by default. Now, if you're in marathon season, you may have some people who are going to be performing over 90% age graded. So you might want to adjust that, or you might want to use that as a good indication that you need to look into a participant further. We also have finishers without start times, which is useful to determine if someone maybe started out of corral or jumped on the course later. And you may also be interested in using the missed split data check, but you can also create your own, and this should be done ahead of race day. This would include things like looking for participants who missed a specific split. So you might have a turnaround on the course that's maybe not publicly advertised, and you might want to be just looking for people who missed that one. You may have a split that is on the half marathon course and not on the marathon course, and you could write a check to identify any marathon participants who read on that split, meaning that you should potentially change them or disqualify them depending on the event's rules. This can also be useful in the data checks for setting up the monitoring of progress of certain groups of athletes, whether that's identifying where the wheelchair athletes are at, if they're in a subset of the marathon sport event. You can also be using this to track on certain groups like ambassadors or founders or pacers or something like that that may need to be reported on for race organizers. It's also worth remembering that data checks can be exported, both the data check report for being used in multiple races and also the data checks output itself. You don't have to save them either. If you need like a quick scratch pad, you can use a data check on the fly and just not save it if you're trying to figure out some pieces. You're going to hear me say this a couple times during this webinar, but race day is not for thinking. As much of the thinking that can be done before the gun goes off as the better. So, have all your data checks in place that you're going to need, so that when you have to do something on the fly, there's not a domino effect of kind of missed items, or you're not distracted writing a data check or setting up an auto save and miss that maybe your half marathon split isn't online or something like that. So the more you can be in the moment, the better. And there's a lot of resources here in the setup end of things that can be done, days, weeks ahead of time. Custom exports. So in race day scoring, using the reports, you don't need to send them all to RunSignup. A report doesn't just need to be your live results. In fact, there's probably a lot of stuff that you're going to be doing on race day at a marathon or a half marathon that doesn't get published as the results. So you should set these up ahead of time as well as custom reports. Keep in mind that you can filter certain participants in or out of these reports, and that you can save them in different formats such as HTML, CSV, text, and PDF. And you can set them up as autosaves as well. So some of these reports that you might be interested in setting up ahead of time would be medical reports, reports that go to the event photographer or the medal engravers, Boston Marathon export. That one's a very important one for marathons on certified courses. Reports for USATF officials, maybe scrolling reports for displaying on site. These should all be set up ahead of time and tested. Some of these are pretty standard. Others are maybe unique to the event. Either way, you should make sure that these are prepared, and you should also make sure that you're checking with the organizers as to whether or not it's actually appropriate to produce these for certain organizations. If a photographer says, hey, can you give me a report with everybody's email and date of birth and all this stuff, that's something where it's generally best to make sure that the organizer is okay with you sending it, or maybe the organizer wants you to send it to them to pass along to those people. Some export considerations. One thing that's newer in race day scoring is the ability to export a CSV without commas in the overall and gender places. That's very useful depending on where you're sending it. It's also important to keep in mind that if you're making an autosave to file report, consider how many you're making and how often you're writing them. If you are saving the entire result set as a CSV every second, it's entirely possible that that won't finish saving until within that 1 second window, and subsequently you are just kind of creating a queue of the same set of data over and over again. So think about how often you actually want to be doing some of that stuff in the background. You should also consider report naming conventions. That'll make it a lot easier to filter down what you're looking for. Personally, I like to put a number ahead of things so that I can kind of track, I'll have a block of like, maybe I need to pay attention to the marathon progress first, and I'll have that all numbered 1. So I can easily filter anything with the leading 1 on it and just focus on that until I need to move on to the next piece. You might have a different, naming convention That's really going to be kind of personal preference on that, but having a naming convention goes a long ways towards finding your report. You know, these are the type of events where you're going to have people over your shoulder more than normal. So looking like you can find things easily is pretty important. You might be the best timer in the world, but if you can't find the report that they're asking for, you're not going to look like it to them. And also keep track of what time you have to produce certain reports. Keeping a cut sheet or just a spreadsheet on the side and checking off cells as you go is a really good way to make sure that you have produced everything that you need to. You've probably been up for a long time at the point that you're producing these reports. So having something else that's externalizing that is very helpful. One thing that you're going to see here in these sections, and we don't need to go through all of this necessarily, I'll probably just kind of speed run it, is some checklists there to just make sure that you've gotten all of your ducks in the row. So in the case of splits and segments, making sure you know the location, the distance, the equipment, communication method, and that you've tested all of your equipment with spares. You know, N+1 is a good rule during this time of year, and that the segment is set up in race day scoring. One thing that larger races or races with a lot of splits often implement is something called a course check. And that's something where there's a dedicated staff member with some spare equipment there who can go down the course and check all of the splits and make sure that everybody has their hardware set up in the right spot, set up properly, tested properly. And if they don't have, or if something breaks, maybe an Ethernet cable needs replacement, maybe a decoder or controller battery isn't so good, they have the ability to help replace that or bolster that. And this also allows you as the head of a timing company or the head timer at this event to trust a little bit less skilled staff in that they can do the task of operating a split because they have this resource out there who can get around the course as needed to get them the support that they would need. So you don't have to worry about it. This does kind of go to, and we'll talk about this at the end with organization and troubleshooting, just having a communication plan and having a triage for this. As far as data checks go, making sure they're created. It's always good to test your data checks ahead of time and make sure that they're pulling in participants who meet the parameters you're looking for. Making sure that if you have local fields that you're trying to fill in for the data check, that those are created ahead of time and that you're not scrambling to create those on site. And that rules for acting on data checks, whether that's disqualifying people who miss a certain split or not, are confirmed with organizers. And it's always good to confirm those ahead of time and again on race day. Most organizers want to be really tough and DQ anyone who drops down from the marathon to the half marathon until race day, when they're really happy and in a good mood and decide that that's not the case anymore. So confirm. And on the reporting side, confirm the format, the columns and filters, who the stakeholders will be, whether you can send it to them or not, confirming who sends the report, timeline of reporting, and then just test the output of all of these pieces. In one of those resources that we linked to a little earlier, Matt Avery does a really good explanation of how to test your reports that everybody should really be doing if they're producing these pieces. For the race day check-in event or app, this is really one of the first touch points that a race is going to have with participants outside of registration and email communication. It's also a really good way to make sure that you have good data as the timer. And what that means is, making sure that you're testing the presets and configurations, maybe giving it a once over yourself. If you're training the volunteers yourself, making sure that you have good documentation, making sure that you have any shift changes covered there, and also making sure all of your equipment's up to date. And that means, know how many devices you're providing, if any. And again, the N+1 rule applies here. making sure you know how you're getting the data to RunSignup from the check-in app, whether or not the packet pickup venue has internet, or if you're providing the internet, or maybe if you have tablets that have SIM cards, and then double checking that, checking and making sure that you're actually able to get that data to RunSignup. And if not, like what your plan is for syncing it later. Consider helping the organizers set up and test presets and configurations and train the volunteers. I really like to share this video that Kevin and Andrew made. I think it is one of the best and most succinct ways to explain how to use the check-in app. And I think that everyone should have that in their communication with organizers. If the event is doing label printing, making sure that you've tested that thoroughly and that you have your whole setup planned there. And then, if they're doing anything post-race, maybe they're considering using the check-in devices as results kiosks. So making sure you know how to do that and that you have a plan to switch those over. Some best practices within the check-in app, having a separate preset and configuration for administrative or staff personnel versus volunteers, making sure that bib validation is turned on and that you are preventing duplicate bibs across events. Training volunteers on putting names on the back of the bibs, especially if you're doing dynamic bib assignment, making sure that there's not the possibility of people swapping their bibs around in the hotel room race morning. Make sure that all devices are charged and updated, both that the device's operating system is up to date and that the check-in app is updated. It's also good practice to download the database in the check-in app before going to packet pickup. Just one less step to worry about there. It's also a good idea to make sure that the devices are all named uniquely. Make sure you have a clear plan for getting the data synced to RunSignup. Again, making sure that your communication works. Having extra chargers, devices, labels, pens, and pins. Even if you're not the person providing the pins, if that's the bib organizer, you should probably be traveling with a box of pins in every vehicle you have. It'll save the day. Even if you're not charging for it, no one's going to forget that you saved them with that. It's very hard to buy pins in bulk on a Saturday night. And then for the shift change, just making sure you have a plan for that. And then finally, in bold, and perhaps this should have been its own slide, making sure that you have the check-in date range and password set correctly. If that's not set, nothing's happening. So if you say, well, I tested it and that's not set, you definitely didn't test it. For the check-in, there's a check-in checklist. Make sure you have your device count confirmed, devices updated, charged, named. Make sure the database is downloaded and service is confirmed. Make sure you have a password and date range set. Same with presets, configurations, workflow, just test everything. The check-in app is a really important place to have everything tested because it's possibly at a venue where you are not personally present. You might be out setting up at the finish line for the next morning. So making sure that everything is really clear and straightforward goes a long way. Because if you have bad data here, you are going to have a bad time race day. If you are not already offering RaceJoy, now's a really good time to revisit that, especially with the chip timing integration and the new predictive tracking. So, RaceJoy is the only certification that we require for you to offer a product. So timers offering RaceJoy must be certified. If you're not certified, please reach out to RaceJoy at runsignup.com for the certification materials. If you're interested in offering predictive tracking, you must have enough tracking points, and that means splits. Half marathons must have at least 2 intermediate points, marathons at least 3. And you should be, if possible, collecting participant estimated finish time during registration. When organizers come to you as saying like, hey, can you do this? Like, I love the app for this race. RaceJoy is what they're talking about when they're asking about a tracking app. With RaceJoy, if the registration is on RunSignup, you have a really great resource. If it's not on RunSignup, there is a fee associated, but you can still offer it. Now, offering something and just turning it on is very different from actually implementing it. And I'll highlight that again in a moment, but do keep that in mind. Tracking apps are historically a really big part of the production, the lift, and the optics of marathons and half marathons. They deliver a really premium experience and also provide an activation point for sponsors. This is something that you as a timer are probably charging for offering. And that can be offset by the organizers by having sponsors who are specifically covered and activated by pieces of the tracking app, whether that's logos or banner ads, keeping in mind that the first 3 banner ads get the most play. Geo-based cheers, editing the default location or default notifications, and then adding some pieces to spruce up the map, whether that's points of interest, maybe sponsor hotels, or other things like that. And again, just the adoption of RaceJoy by spectators is really contingent on communicating with them, which means you want to have this planned out early. You want to make sure that the organizers are really informing both participants and spectators that RaceJoy is out there, that they can track their participant either through GPS or through chip timing if you're offering that. But again, if they're not telling people, you're not going to get everyone listening to that. And again, like these are numbers that you can return afterwards, the usage numbers from RaceJoy. You can return to the organizers and really show them the value in ways that it's kind of hard to quantify with other pieces of timing. And they're able to show that value to their sponsors. And you have this kind of nice cycle of, okay, you're showing the value, they're showing value to the people who are paying for it, which means maybe they're going to pay more for it or have it at their other events as well. This is a great way to kind of really make yourself an integral part of, delivering for sponsors as well. Keeping in mind that like other tracking apps, you as the timer might not have the same level of control over, and instead might be having to move data to a third-party platform and send data over there and not make any money off of it, despite the work that you're doing. So the more control you have over this, the better. And again, one of the great things about RaceJoy is that we're, again, operating off of the same set of data. It's always nice to have the exact same result data in the tracking app as in the actual results. And that's not always the case. So some RaceJoy checklist. This is actually a more important one, so I do want to go through this one a little bit more. In the RaceJoy setup, making sure that you are asking the pace question, making sure that RaceJoy is enabled and that the tracking window is appropriate, making sure the course maps are loaded, the timing points configured, and the course is certified in RaceJoy. In the race day scoring integration, making sure that the chip timing integration is enabled, making sure that the timing only points are identified properly in RaceJoy, that your segments are set up properly, meaning that your location times for accepting reads and your segment minimum times are all configured and named properly. Keeping in mind that if you are naming segments and they're going to RaceJoy, that it matters how things sound to the participant and what those notifications look like to someone who is not actually running but is spectating. On the marketing side, making sure that things like banner ads and logos are set up, geo-based cheers are added, notifications and emails are customized so that this is telling your race's story, and that there is an email campaign going on that's informing participants that RaceJoy is enabled, that they can be tracked, that this is the official tracking app of the race. And then on race day itself, using that monitoring link, that is a really cool value add, especially if your race has like a command center. Being able to give them the RaceJoy monitoring is a huge plus for them to be able to just have that at a glance. And then on your end as the timer, checking the monitoring for off-course participants, and then post-race, making sure you're passing back those usage stats to the organizers so that they can offer those to the sponsors or just see the value that you've added by offering this. Results and reporting is driven pretty heavily from what we just talked about with segments. And again, keeping in mind that reporting is, in this instance, is more about producing live results on RunSignup. So making sure that you're using filters to generate multiple reports for the same scored event. If you're doing like a subset, maybe you have a firefighter report, maybe you have a founders report. Maybe everybody's in the same scored event, but you're having to filter out hand cycles for a certain autosave. Make sure that your age groups are set up and that all award considerations are implemented and tested. If you're using RunSignup photos, make sure that that's ready to go and that you have a watermark applied so that when photos are tagged, they have that nice watermark there. Set up your autosaves to RunSignup and make sure that report names are clear, appropriate, and easily found in the dropdown. When you name a report, that's how it's going to be viewed by spectators and participants. So making sure that's clear, you know, is this male overall? Is this the firefighter report? What leaderboard am I looking at here? Make that all clear and test it. I honestly will ask my parents, hey, does this make sense? Understanding that they're not timers. Consider how splits will display. It's worth noting that in marathons and half marathons, it's much more common to show cumulative time than it is to show segment time, like it might be in a triathlon. So making sure that that looks the way you want, it is showing the way you want, and looks good not just on desktop, but also on mobile. Keeping in mind that most spectators on site, well, they probably don't have a desktop computer or a laptop computer with them. Some reporting best practices: confirm what fields should be shown and test that your column names match those. Remember that you can rename columns in race day scoring. Making sure autosaves are set up in advance of race day. Test all the reports and make sure that the filters and display filters are working, and also confirming if you should be using a scoring filter or a display filter on a certain report. Making sure that DQ, DNQ, and other statuses are applied appropriately. And also remembering that some reports are internal only and that you should not be sharing that information with some people. Don't put date of birth in a public results set, for example. So a reporting checklist here. We don't really need to go through this too much other than to highlight the fact that this is, again, another good place to have a cut sheet that you're just going down the list on. As far as organizing and troubleshooting, again, thinking is not for day of. Anything that you can have thought of, built, produced, tested ahead of time should be done ahead of time. If you're testing on site, you might miss something else, and that can just snowball because a lot is going on at the same time. There's no such thing as a perfect race. On the inside, there's always going to be something that goes wrong. It's human error times however many participants you have. But what gets put out there, what the end product is what really matters. So being able to troubleshoot before it gets out and before it affects the optics of the race is really the difference between, like I say here, coming back next year and watching the early football game. So make sure your staff is all on the same page as you. Make sure that your communication method is clear, whether you're using a group chat, whether you're using an application like WhatsApp or Slack. Make sure that everybody has everybody else's number to communicate with each other. Have a pre-race meeting. If you have a large staff coming to a race, make sure everybody's there and on the same page, and make sure that they're able and comfortable asking questions. Someone who's newer might hesitate to ask a question and maybe needs to ask it there, and someone else might not know the answer to that. So it's a really good thing that that person asks the question. Make sure that people have a clear process and procedure for what to do when a piece of equipment breaks. What happens if the software isn't working properly? Do you understand what your troubleshooting order of operations should be? Some of these you're not going to be able to fully plan for, but should just know in the back of your mind what to do here. Don't forget about the Get Help button in race day scoring if you do have scoring issues, by the way. Have a plan B for everything. Maybe that's the course check vehicle. Have a plan C for everything. A D, an E. There's the not that he's like the most quotable human being on earth, but Mike Tyson has a quote that I always like to tell people, and that's everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And again, when that goes out the window, make sure you have clear lines of communication and that people can kind of handle what they need to. There's a really good method for communicating with your split operators in these larger events, saying, if something happens and you can fix it, then tell me what happened and what you did to fix it. Because again, the person scoring this race or in charge of the timing is ultimately the one who has to communicate to the race organizers, and again, often has them over their shoulder directly. So if it's something the split operator it can solve and tell you what happened, great. If they can't solve it, then who do they contact? Is it you? Is it course check? Have a clear method for that. Are they supposed to communicate with you on the group chat or directly? Making sure that you have a method for acknowledging that you've heard it, so that they know they shouldn't keep trying, or that they know that you maybe haven't seen it and now it's not a text, now it's a phone call. So again, the more that you plan ahead, the more prepared you are for all of these pieces. So that's a whole lot of me talking at you. Do we have any questions there?
So while Soren and Avery are getting some questions to come in, I just wanted to mention a little bit about one other aspect that was talked about today. Again, as we move into the marathons and the Boston qualifiers and just any kind of certifications, one of the really important things that was talked about was just really understanding how those locations are really important. And, again, as you work with your certifiers, a lot of them, have been doing this a lot of years. They're marking everything up for USATF and getting your documents. One thing I do want to mention, and I've been seeing a lot more of, is use of technology and getting the actual latitude, longitude of those points and getting that as part of your certification. So something to talk to your certifiers about. They can augment those documents. There's a really great app called GPS Tracks. It's really easy for them as they're going out there and measuring to drop pins and be able to provide that information for you. So again, as you start thinking about the experience of a marathon, and we talked a lot today here in terms of that experience. He talked about, the need for split points. He talked about the need for tracking and notifications, whether or not you're using RaceJoy or just doing notifications, making sure that you think about how important those data points are for that person that's running that marathon. And, making sure the signage lines up with your certification, lines up with your clocks, and it's just going to make for a much more precise experience for those people that are running this marathon. So again, it's definitely something that has to be more thoughtful in terms of what you're doing and what you're putting in terms of your product. So, just a few things I want to kind of mention there, using lat long points, getting that stuff with your thing, making sure your people that are putting out the equipment have that information so they know exactly where to go. It's all the technologies there now to really provide for that experience. And then just lining it all up, and people are seeing the signage along with the equipment, and everything lines up, and your notifications are going out based upon those points.
Yeah, one thing that I really think is a big difference maker, as a timing company owner or lead timer, is create a quote unquote book, have a full schedule for what time everything's happening, even if it's just you doing some of these items, knowing when it's happening, where it's happening, being able to identify all of those split items that we discussed there, making sure that you have a list of reports that go here, go there, go to whom, and all of these checks. Have all of this written and just in a document that you keep somewhere. Maybe you keep a backup of your race day scoring instance from 2025 in this folder, keep all of your reads from 2025 in that folder, and then keep this document there so that next year, you're not having to do all of this work all over again. It's a little bit more evergreen and you can just update as needed. It's great for you to save a lot of time. It's also great to remember oh shoot, I should do this, or like, okay, this changed, I need to update that as soon as possible, so that next year you're not having to, again, not having to think about what you don't need to think about. It can also be a huge difference maker if all of a sudden this race has a new race director. Don't underestimate how much institutional knowledge lives with you as the timer, because you're probably going through this race more than some of their staff has. And as staff changes, you might be the resource that they need, and maybe they don't know they need it until they ask the question. But you can say, actually, no, here's the reporting that you needed last year, or actually, no, this was over here. Have you changed your course? You're no longer just a technology expert, but you are just indispensable resource for them. It's this kind of stuff is what makes you look really good. I did see in the chat, someone was asking about label printing. We're not going to really dive into that piece of it. There is an actual entire webinar just about label printing. It's a pretty niche case for some of this stuff, and definitely kind of needs more than just a couple moments touched on. But the short version is that you can use the Race Day Check-in app to print labels, whether that's participant labels as they are assigned bibs, or you could use it for some other kind of cool uses, maybe with a metal engraver or something like that. And if there aren't any other questions there, it'd just be good to mention that we will have a webinar as we go into this marathon season on Thursday about the check-in app and kind of a Q&A session with myself and Matt Avery. And that would be a good one there. It's not just for timers. So if you have organizers who are new to the check-in app or new to dynamic assignment or something like that, it'd be great to invite them to that on Thursday. And then just reiterating that we do have the Timer Summit coming up in January again in Tampa, and to sign up before that does sell out again. Okay, if there aren't any other questions there, just a reminder, we will send you the recording and the slides from this, which will include those checklists that you can use, and also links to the more detailed resources for the specific items, such as advanced reporting, race joy, predictive pace, and label printing. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.